So hello everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Kiri Bird. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Vancouver Foundation. I'm working as a strategist overseeing the Investment Readiness Program and a couple of other strategic projects at the foundation. I'll be your host today. And my colleague, or collaborator, I suppose, Sonam Swarup is also on the call. Sonam, are you able to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yes. So hi, I'm Sonam. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I work with Vancouver or Van City Community Foundation, and part of my role there is to help, or is a bit of a social enterprise developer. I've been kind of seconded to Vancouver Foundation to take on a more active role with Kiri, kind of helping with coaching and support for the applicants in the IRP, and yeah, it's a bit more of a hands-on role managing the education process and some coordination as well.
Thanks so much, Sonam. It's great to have you with us. And actually, I see my colleague Wayne Miranda from Innoweave is here as well. Wayne, do you want to just quickly say hello and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Gary. Hi, everyone. My name is Wayne Miranda. I work with McConnell Foundation based in Toronto. I go by he and him, but because my last name is Miranda, I've often referred or responded to her and she as well. But I will just be supporting Vancouver Foundation through the education process, and pleasure to be here, everyone.
So great to have you both with us on this call today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the capacity building supports available through this IRP round in the webinar, but I'm glad you can put some faces to the names we'll be mentioning and the organizations we'll be mentioning, as I will start sharing my screen to my slide deck now, and you'll mostly be looking at slides for the rest of this call. So just a moment, I will share my screen. So just making sure everyone is in the right place, right time. This is the Investment Readiness Program Round 2 webinar. And Vancouver Foundation, I'd like to acknowledge, is situated on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. So we're exploring, Edgar Villanueva, who's the author of Decolonizing Wealth, uses the saying, how do we use money as medicine? And the foundation is exploring how to do that, and that's a lens we're certainly trying to bring to the IRP program. We'd certainly like to support self-determination and agency of Indigenous people through the work of IRP, and we're excited to be able to do that. A bit of an overview for our webinar today. It will be 1 hour. I have about 35 minutes of content. It's a little dense. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to get through it, but also give everyone the information that they need to prepare their applications. We'll do a brief overview of the program, spend some time talking about the projects that were awarded in round 1, and then really spend the bulk of the conversation on the questions that we ask ourselves when adjudicating applications that hopefully will help folks to prepare stronger applications or understand what decisions and criteria we're using. And then we'll talk a little bit about the concept brief process, which I've alluded to a bit already in terms of capacity building opportunities that will be introduced for this round of IRP. And we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Sonam is graciously going to be moderating the chat for me while I present. And so we will try to get to clarifying questions as we go, but for the most part, we're hoping to save questions for the question and answer period at the end. So the IRP, I think you are all familiar at this point, supports social purpose organizations, including charities, cooperatives, nonprofits, and for-profit social enterprises that fund projects to develop the readiness to take on future social finance investment, such as debt or equity. And so I think that the language in the first round for IRP was a little bit more open around future investment and kind of more options available, but we're really trying to draw a stronger link to borrowing repayable capital, such as debt or equity, in this round. So please do note that that language is stronger throughout the program guidelines, as well as Vancouver Foundation's language. The second call opens September 8th and closes October 9th. It closes at 5 p.m. Pacific time. I think there were a few people who didn't quite see the cutoff time last round, and that caused a bit of confusion. So do be aware that applications will not be accepted after 5 p.m. Pacific. And results are expected to be communicated to applicants in early 2021. We do have a stretch goal to try to get back to everyone in December, but I think it to be conservative, maybe planning for to be hearing it back in early 2021. And the projects must be actually completed by June 30th, 2021. So this is relatively new information to us, even in the organizing of the IRP. So the projects that folks are applying for in the second round really are just sort of 5-month projects that can take place between probably like February and June 2021. So that's really important to consider when preparing your application. We have about $900,000 to distribute, and we'll probably be able to select between 20 and 30 projects. Just a reminder that we are one of 5, Vancouver Foundation is one of 5 regional partners in BC. And we're covering social purpose organizations applying from Metro Vancouver and a couple of other regions, including the Sunshine Coast, the Sea to Sky Corridor, the Thompson-Nicola Valley District, and the Kootenays. There are other regional partners servicing different areas of the province. So the first things first is make sure you figure out you're applying to the right regional partner. And some preferences may be different. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about today in terms of our developed philosophy of funding and preferences may be different. National organizations may also apply directly to Community Foundations of Canada. This was actually introduced, I think, halfway through the last call. So if you are a national organization, then you should look into that option. And then you can find contact information for the appropriate regional partner for you on the CFC website. So that's linked in these slides. When you get a copy, you're welcome to do that, or you can just Google Regional Partners Investment Readiness Program and you'll probably find it. Last but not least, the IRP is a large ecosystem of actors across the country, including actually Wayne's work at Innoweave. And so there are other funding partners available with different focuses and different geographies. So if you want to learn more about that, you can visit the ESDC website. And I will specifically name that Canadian Women's Foundation is funding charities who are developing social enterprise with a gender equity lens. And they have another call for applications opening up September 12th. So if you would fit well into that category, then maybe consider applying to Canadian Women's Foundation, either in addition to or instead of Vancouver Foundation. Maybe just to clarify, if you are a social purpose organization in BC, you cannot apply to more than one community foundation or regional partner. You have to select one, but there is nothing that prohibits you from applying to both Vancouver Foundation and one of the other national partners, which is the same as last round. That information hasn't changed. So this webinar actually assumes that you have read kind of the Vancouver Foundation website, the program guidelines. In these documents, you'll find lots of useful information like the application deadlines, eligibility, eligible costs, like lots of stuff that's really, really useful in preparing your application. I'm not going to go over any of that more today. This is the whole introduction. So we're just going to dive into kind of learnings from the first round from here. But do make sure you visit these documents. And if you applied in round 1 and you read these documents 6 months ago, it's worth looking at them again because there have been some updates. Oh, whoops, I just clicked on. There we go. All right, so in the first round for IRP, we received at Vancouver Foundation 185 applications for a total of just under $10 million in funding requests. It was quite oversubscribed. It was about a 10-to-1 ratio of requests to what we had available for funding. Ultimately, we funded 23 projects at just over 900,000, so 963.30, with the average award size of $40,000, which is quite significantly less than the average request we received. This data mirrors what we saw across the country, in fact, and so I think it's important to think through, no one was funded at $100,000. So while the opportunity is to apply for between $10,000 and $100,000, You know, most people did not receive that, and it was mostly requests in the sort of the under 50 range that were funded. So do keep this in mind when preparing your application. And so here are a list of projects that were funded in the first call for applications. These are also on our website. We've now published a list of all the social purpose organizations that were funded and the project descriptions. And so you can link to it through this slide, or you can check the Vancouver Foundation website. I'm sure folks will recognize some of the projects here, and congratulations to those that were awarded. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but I am going to tell you a little bit about a couple of the projects we did fund. So hoping to provide some examples that will maybe shed some light on sort of decision-making processes and what we're sort of interested in seeing. So the Wild Bird Trust of BC, one of the reasons I chose this example is I don't think a lot of our advisors had ever heard of this project before they applied to IRP, so it was definitely not a usual suspect, I wouldn't say. But the Wild Bird Trust manages the conservation area at Maplewood Flats in North Vancouver, and it's located on the traditional territory of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And building on 3 years of success, the Wild Bird Trust seeks to establish a Coast Salish plant nursery and really become the primary provider of native plants regionally. And so they were going to use the IRP funding towards business planning, engaging a couple of expert consultants to help them with that process, doing their branding and marketing, and then a bit of product development, and completing some minor asset purchases that were required to meet existing demand. Reviewers liked about this application a really strong environmental and ecological focus of both the native plant nursery and the bird sanctuary. The nursery also runs lots of educational programs as well. And they really were able to demonstrate through their application a strong relationship with the local host nation, with Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and sort of an ongoing opportunity to even sort of sell plants to the nation and work with them collaboratively on a number of projects. So that was definitely appreciated as a sort of more land-based organization. And the funding was sort of, for kind of to take the right next steps. That was sort of the conversation we had around firming up the business plan. They had really thoughtfully selected and shared information about the advisors they wanted to bring in, or the service providers. And even though they have quite small successes in terms of revenue to date, there was consistent modest growth. And so while this organization we felt might be unlikely to take on, it's not a tech company that's looking for tons of money, that kind of stuff, is unlikely to attract significant investment. Their growth strategy and sustainability plans did point to the need for, some small debt further down the line, or microfinancing. It was obvious that that was part of their overall sort of growth vision. So we wanted to highlight this one as, a local community-based business, still quite early stage, but was able to be successful because of these other components. I'm going to go through one more example, and then I'm going to pause for a second, just check the chat. Another example is Brave Technology Co-op. So Brave designs software and hardware to prevent opioid deaths, accidental opioid deaths, and address social isolation. So they have sort of buttons and software and things that people can identify that they are using substances, and they may need some harm reduction or some support in the near future. And so their organization, they were looking to use IRP funds to do value proposition refinement, branding, and market positioning work to prepare for raising their next round of social finance investment. And so a few things we really liked about this proposal. They have had demonstrated traction, so they've been successful in winning some contracts, some awards. They had a very clear vision around scaling and plan to raise investment. So this was sort of a little later on that stage, the investment readiness continuum. Obviously, overdose prevention is a critical social issue in British Columbia. And I think importantly, the business growth is inextricably linked, as I say here, to social impact, in the sense that the more software or hardware this company sells, the more deaths they'll be able to prevent. And so it's not a particular company that's raising, doing business over here and generating income that's then used for social good. It's actually linked. And so that is something that kind of helps, to score more points in the adjudication process, so to speak. And last but not least, the cooperative model demonstrates, democratic control and share of benefits in the company. They have a very actually complex co-op model that includes also people with lived experience and substance users as owners, as well as really participating in the design process and even participating in the project that was proposed to IRP. So there were a lot of things about participation of the communities that were impacted that sort of shone through in this proposal. Okay, I'm gonna do one more because I think this goes with the last two examples. I just want to talk briefly to what wasn't funded. Excuse me 1 second. So social finance intermediaries, and maybe I'll just back up and say, these are some of the things that might be different with other regional partners. So I definitely don't speak on behalf of, the Prince George Foundation or any of the other BC regional partners when I share this, but these are some of the kind of like philosophies of funding that were developed through the first round by our consortium team and will be implemented in the second round as well. So social finance intermediaries, and by those I mean like impact funds primarily that, of course, like those are businesses. They have plans to secure future investment, like raising more money to invest in more companies, and they certainly have a revenue model. However, they were sort of seen to be not the target audience for this particular program. One of the reasons for that is that we don't know who the companies are that social finance funds will invest in. Because they'll go through their own adjudication and deliberation processes. So trying to identify like who and where are the communities that will benefit from these investments was just a little too indirect for what the sort of review and consortium team wanted to see through this program. So I would not generally recommend, if you are an impact fund, applying to the Vancouver Foundation IRP in round 2. I will say there are exceptions, of course, because there are always exceptions. Like, for example, we did fund the Native Fishing Association to develop a micro loan program for Indigenous fishers. And in that case, you can tell exactly like where and who the beneficiaries of the loans will be. And for that reason, we were able to make that connection to direct community impact. And as another example, Sunshine Coast Community Futures is a social finance intermediary. However, the project they applied for was focusing on being kind of a backbone for a social purpose real estate project. And so, again, there are specific cases that might work. So I would encourage, if your organization is a social finance intermediary, to potentially participate in the concept brief phase. And then we can determine a final answer. I'm not sure if it's maybe Vanessa again, but someone's unmuted, and yeah, it's all good. Gone now. Oops. Second. So expert service providers, in a similar vein, so these are folks who are doing capacity building with social purpose organizations. For example, you might be helping a social purpose organization with like financial services or marketing services or impact measurement services. We're not really seen as the target audience for this program. So, expert service providers are accessing IRP funding by being hired by social purpose organizations. And so, that sort of service provider, if you would qualify as a service provider for this program, you probably should not directly apply for the program. That is the guidance I would give. Again, reach out if you want to discuss your particular circumstances. Enterprising charities and nonprofits who are generating revenue but who do not have a plan to secure repayable capital. So we did see quite a bit of this, particularly with charities and nonprofits. And so folks, we saw, you know, service organizations like senior services centers, or like, you know, places that have drop-in co-working spaces, or I think we had like an ice rink apply, for example. Like, of course, you know, people are paying dues, they're participating, so you're generating revenue, and you may be held by a charitable entity, and so that is enterprising, and like we fully are in support of you continuing to develop your social enterprise. But unless you can sort of point to a specific kind of growth plan, sustainability strategy that includes accessing repayable capital, this probably isn't the right program for you. And so we are going to try to discourage some of those applications earlier in the process this round, and also potentially be able to suggest some other programs, such as maybe potentially with Innoweave, for example, that might be able to support those organizations where they are at. We also drew a distinction between applications from, you know, groups that were trying to develop an individual, like, non-market housing site. And so, yeah, if you have selected a site in Kamloops and you want to put in 24 units of affordable housing, this isn't really the program to do the business planning for that one development. However, we are interested in seeking applications from folks who are thinking broadly about how to build their capacity as developers. So if, you know, you're thinking about redeveloping, well, you're a non-market housing developer, commercial real estate, yeah, if you want to build your capacity as a business to do lots of development projects, that would be eligible for funding through this project. And then just a reminder, like, unfortunately, 88% of people who didn't apply were not successful due to high demand. So I'm trying to highlight a few of the trends we saw that we would sort of discourage folks from applying if they fall into these categories. But at the end of the day, like, you know, the program was quite highly oversubscribed. So please don't feel too disappointed if you in fact were declined in the first round. I'm just gonna stop share for one moment so I can see folks and just take a look at any questions. A bunch of questions about the recording. Yes, it will be available to all. National orgs apply where? The Community Foundations of Canada website. Yeah, I'm actually not sure exactly where. I will add a link into that sentence and include it in the slides when we put them out. Oh, and someone answered it. Thanks, Sonam. Okay, perfect. I've got a couple more people who are just looking to join. Everyone's muted. Everyone's in. Great. Okay. And so for some folks who are joining late, just know that you'll receive the recording and you can catch up on the first 30 minutes. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to go back to presenting. Would you follow up with a list of programs? Yes. In terms of resources for enterprising social purpose organizations, we are actually, with the rest of the BC regional partners, co-developing a resource list that hopefully will be available to folks. So yeah, we can share that. I don't have it immediately, but maybe within a few weeks we'll have that available. Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. Going back to my screen share here. All right, so these are some of the questions we reflected on when evaluating applications, so we felt they'd be helpful to share. And I'm going to start with some of the things that led to the most sort of disqualification of applicants in the first round, which was related to budget and team. So ineligible activities was like the #1 reason we unfortunately weren't able to fund folks. Please look at the program guidelines. There's a list of eligible activities, and select from those or talk to us about other ones, and really just make sure that no more than 20% of the project budget is allocated towards the costs of your staff to sort of oversee or administrate or deliver on those projects. So unfortunately, you know, IRP funding is not really for core staff. It's for new costs and expert service providers. That's the intention. So do make sure that you're putting money towards the right things the program is meant to go towards. The other thing we saw quite a lot of was folks, applying for $100,000 and then saying, we'll put 20K towards this and 30K towards this, and kind of working backwards from that number. So, don't do that. Don't take that approach. I'd really encourage you to reach out to service providers and get quotes, attach quotes, and really be clear that what you're asking for is appropriate to carry out the workload. We also strongly encourage social purpose organizations to consider an ask relative to their stage of readiness. So if you're, very early stage, like pre-revenue, don't ask for $50,000 plus. Like be, I would say, modest in your approach. If you are a large established organization, like you're a $60 million charity that has lots of government contracts, or you're, a for-profit social enterprise earning more than $1 million in revenue a year, I would, consider including some of your own contributions to the project, sort of in kind or cash resources. It's not required, but it kind of helps us to see also like the more fulsome scope of the work you're doing and contributing, and then how this particular funding plays into the overall mix. And then last but not least, does the project team have the experience to carry out the project? We definitely did. Your appendices, your attached documents do get reviewed. They're appreciated. So I think the CFC program asks for bios from the management team, and those get read, and those definitely are used in supporting the adjudication. So, you don't maybe just link a LinkedIn profile, like spend a little bit of time talking us through who the people are who are involved in the project. That really does help. We're looking at viability, of course. So most explicitly, like, is there demand demonstrated? What is the market opportunity? Have you done the research into this? And what is the growth or sustainability strategy? The application form for round 2 more clearly and explicitly asks about market demand or opportunity. So do spend some time on that question. That's certainly of consideration. Relative to the stage of development, is there demonstrated evidence of trajectory towards growth? So just like I mentioned with Wild Bird Trust, for example, is there even modest growth is really important to show. Does the SPO's financial situation back up its projections? So especially for those organizations that say they're, financial resilience, investment readiness stage, like a little further along in the process, what is their financial situation, and could investors look at them seriously as an investment? If it's pre-revenue, this one we did have a bit of trouble with, I'll be honest. So, startups with no history that are pre-revenue, it was very hard to be successful in this program in the first round. So, the organizations that were pre-revenue that were successful either had they were within like existing, let's say, charities or nonprofits that had a history of success delivering on other programs. And so there's infrastructure there and accountability, et cetera. Or they had really, really strong kind of leadership, boards, advisors who had sort of a demonstrated experience. So it's not to say that if you're pre-revenue as a startup, you can't be successful, but there's, I think, some things to take into consideration, like a modest ask, like, really building out your advisory team, like showing us that you know what I mean, that it isn't as high risk an opportunity as it may seem. And then, is the business model resilient to the impacts of COVID? And this is still a bit of an open question for the IRP round 2, but I wanted to talk about it today. So there is not currently a question on the application form asking how, how this SPO is navigating COVID. So I don't think you're going to have to put it in the application, but I would advise that, especially if your particular organization or particular project or business could be heavily impacted by COVID, like, for example, if it's a cafe in a cafe, or it's a catering company, or if it's a co-working space, for example, like, there's certain businesses that we know have been so impacted, and services in particular. And so I think it would be prudent to include a paragraph that you write and attach it as an appendix about how you're navigating it, you know, what accommodations you plan to make to reopen, things like that. And so CFC is making it fun by only allowing you to have like one kind of generic attachment for the round 2 instead of multiple. But I really do think this information will support decision making. I wouldn't want advisors not to have that information than to be making guesses about it. So I would encourage you to just write a paragraph and sort of merge it in a PDF with any other attachments that you have. That's my advice. And or maybe there will be an application question about this, and in that case you don't have to do that. But I think it's better to give the advisors more information and go from there. So yeah, we're obviously concerned about investment readiness, and these are some of the questions we're asking. So will the proposed like project and activity lead to investment readiness? You know, is it the right project at the right time? Relative to the stage of development, is there a plan in place for securing future debt or equity? Again, if you're early stage, you just have to kind of demonstrate that there's you know, a vision for growth that will at some point require, you know, borrowing capital. Based on the SPO's financial situation, business model team, is this or will it become an investable social enterprise? So this is sort of, I guess, the accumulation of a lot of the different other considerations. But it's not all about, you know, the business strength and investability. It's definitely also about the impact. So we are looking at how the activities themselves create social, cultural, or environmental value. So this is connected to that piece of being kind of inextricably linked I mentioned earlier. Not only will the proposed project make the SPO more investment ready, but will the proposed project enhance the impact of the SPO is certainly something we're considering. I really want to emphasize these last 2 points. That for environmentally focused organizations like circular economy or green building, it was easier for those organizations to score higher if there was sort of a triple bottom line. So if there was also social cultural value being created. The program, I will say, is like a little bit more skewed towards the social cultural, I think. So, you know, if you are just like a strict circular economy SPO with no social cultural mandate, for example, then just know that that might, you know, you'd have to score very high in other places in order to be competitive. So it's definitely something to consider whether or not it's a good fit for you, this program. From land-based organizations as well, so like retreat centers or conservation organizations like the one we talked about previously, we do want to know what the relationship to Indigenous peoples and approach to Indigenous land stewardship is. CFC is actually asking about this explicitly in the application form this time. That doesn't apply to every organization. And last but not least, CFC, that's Community Foundations of Canada. I apologize, I think I've been using that acronym without defining it. Community Foundations of Canada is increasing their focus on equity for this round. And so we don't just want to know, like, is the organization, you know, supporting priority groups and equity seeking community, but in fact, is it led by equity seeking groups and communities, and are there decision makers within the project who are representative of the population it seeks to serve. And there's application questions now about this, so you'll have room to kind of discuss that in your application. And or is there evidence of impacted community support for this initiative? So yeah, sometimes startup teams are really small and there's maybe not room for as much diversity. However, you know, is there meaningful engagement happening? Can you point to those relationships being developed and considered and influencing the way you're approaching the project? And so really want to encourage, yeah, letters of support. I would say the two best appendices, I don't think they're called appendices, sorry, but the attachments to include are like letters of support are fantastic, as are quotes from service providers. So those are some of the key things to consider. You don't have to consider all of those things at once, but those are kind of the multiplicity of factors that are leading to, you know, this into the scoring system and into us, you know, appreciating having some projects rise to the top. So I would just think about, does your organization excel in a number of those areas? It doesn't have to be every one, but you do want to try to think about having the broadest possible kind of strength in those areas. And so yeah, after reviewing all the information online, this webinar, please do feel free to prepare an application if you think it's a good fit. And the templates for this round are available on the Vancouver Foundation website. These are just to use as reference when you're kind of starting to type out your questions. There are 2 application forms, one for charities and one for all other types of businesses. Please fill out the right one and select the right one when you apply, because it does create challenges for us down the road if that's not done correctly. And there's a budget template this year. Yay! I think everyone will really appreciate that. And the budget template does include an opportunity to say about like in-kind resources or cash resources that are contributing. But what I really want to talk to you about is this opportunity to submit a concept brief this round to Vancouver Foundation to decide if your organization is well suited to apply to the Investment Readiness Program. So yes, the concept brief process is a completely optional exercise, and it runs basically parallel to the formal applications. So if you want to be considered for funding, you have to submit a full application to CFC through their portal at the link that's on this page and on all of the pages. But if you can optionally choose to send like a condensed version that sort of mirrors the application question, but there's only about 10 of them, and you don't have to submit all of the auxiliary documents, all of the financial statements, all of those other things. And someone from our team, specifically it will be myself, Sonam, and Wayne, who you just met in this webinar, will get back to you and kind of either let you know, yes, this project looks aligned with the IRP goals, and we don't have any comments to help you strengthen your application. Go ahead and submit a full one so that we can review all of the information together, basically. Or, sorry, this doesn't look totally aligned with the program goals, but maybe we can try to suggest some other resources. Or, yes, this looks well aligned with the program goals, but we do have some suggestions to help you strengthen your application, and so let's set up a consultation to discuss it. And so we're preparing to work with hopefully quite a few folks one-on-one to kind of review their applications, and really the goal is to reduce some of the ineligibility issues that we saw in the last round. Hopefully, you know what I mean, like if you're not going to be successful, discourage you from applying earlier on in the process, so you're not waiting 6 months for an answer. And 3, to provide some additional coaching and capacity building, especially for earlier stage or applications from equity-seeking communities that may not have as much access. So those are our intentions in creating this process, and hopefully it'll work well. I'll just say, once you submit your concept brief, you'll get a copy of those responses. And again, they mirror the application questions, so you can hopefully use that work at a later date. The concept brief stage is only going to be open until September. It actually starts next week. Excuse me. So especially for those organizations that are reapplying, if you already have quite a bit of your content drafted, feel free to submit a concept brief early. And you can do this actually before the application portal formally opens through September 30th, which is a week before the application portal closes, because we'll need to like triage and deal with those last requests. So really do note that it closes September 30th. This option will not be available after that time. Okay, so yeah, you'll get a copy of these slides. You'll have this email. We are requesting questions be emailed in this round. We're not accepting phone calls. The Vancouver Foundation website will have all of the information about the concept brief phase published early next week. And so I'll just stop sharing now and create some space for questions and answers. So Sonam, I'm just trying to look through everything here. Is there one that I should be looking at first? Any questions I should be looking at first?
Sorry, I was going to say there's a question about the reviewers and who will be reviewing the applications.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I'm just reading through these as we go. So yeah, this program, Vancouver Foundation typically publishes all of our review committees. Unfortunately, like for this program, CFC has actually requested that we don't do that. I don't have much more information on the rationale behind that, but what I can share is, there's some folks from Vancity Community Foundation, Inuit, UBC, Center for Impact Investing. We're sort of the consortium team. That information is public, so you know that we're all involved. In addition to that, it's folks who either identify as entrepreneurs themselves, social enterprise capacity builders, or social finance in like organizations who are actually making social finance investments. And so it's it's great to have those different perspectives on the committee. And I will share that there is going to be a separate, an entirely separate review committee for organizations which are applying from outside Metro Vancouver, or for social purpose organizations which are completely focused on serving rural communities. And so that kind of like more rural and outside Vancouver group are going to have like a separate meeting with all advisors who represent those communities and those geographies. We have been able to ensure that all of the regions we're covering do have representation in terms of someone from the Sunshine Coast and the Kootenays, and so there's representation from all those regions outside of Metro Vancouver that we'll be looking at those applications together. So the concept brief looks like similar to the application form. Like, we've basically taken the questions that we think are the most important ones from the application form. There's like one in each of those categories around viability, investment readiness, impact, equity. We're basically asking kind of like one question in each of those areas, and for a little bit of information just about the size and shape of your organization and project. You can find it on the Vancouver Foundation website starting Monday. And it's a Google form, and yeah, it's just a survey. I really do want to make clear, because this is the first time we've done it, by submitting that form, you are not submitting a formal application. So it's like a parallel process, a separate process. We're doing this to provide guidance and support for your application, but you will have to take all of that learned knowledge and those answers and then resubmit them through CFC. But the questions are very similar, so you will, it's almost like you can do pre-work on your application. Hi, Rocky. We can definitely chat offline about your corporate status. I'm not sure, but we can definitely, Sonam or I will follow up with you after this session, and we'll help you confirm that. And thanks for thanks for getting the clarity, because as I said, it helps down the line if everyone's applied for kind of the right corporate type status. I'm just looking at Vanessa's question here. You have an existing LLC as a financial security tool, not a growth tool. So no, so there were organizations who had already been successful in receiving and deploying social finance investment in the past, and they were looking for new rounds of investment to do additional work. So that should not count against you. But if you'd like to have a deeper conversation, we can certainly do that as well, Vanessa, in preparing your application. The template for budget is available already on the Vancouver Foundation website. Yeah, I'm not going to pull up the website right now because it'll be too distracting to me probably, but it's vancouverfoundation.com. Under grants, you have Investment Readiness Program, and then you have a list of resources underneath. Thanks for clarifying, Liz. So I would say no, future investment does not include readiness to respond to RFPs and contract opportunities. Absolutely, those are, yeah, that's earned revenue generation opportunities. But in this case, we're really seeking to support organizations that are looking to borrow capital, because part of the rationale for this fund was to get the social enterprise ecosystem ready to take on repayable capital investments from the social finance fund, right? So, you know, supporting enterprise development to take on RFPs or contract opportunities, that might be the kind of social enterprise capacity building. I'm wondering if maybe Wayne might want to comment on, like, that might be the sort of thing that maybe social enterprise capacity building funding might be a better fit for, rather than investment readiness capacity building funding. Wayne, do you have if you're still available, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it could be. I honestly don't also have a good answer to that. So Liz, maybe we can also connect offline if that is not a good enough answer right now.
Yeah, let's connect offline about that. Liz, I know that you're in contact with lots of social enterprises through BiSocial, so certainly want to help you understand this program to a T, so that you can communicate all of that to your constituents. Thanks everyone for helping to monitor the chat and provide links. Linda, to confirm, is it better to already show some revenue coming in through the program we are applying for funding? Yes, it is. Yeah, we would love to see some demonstrated traction, even if it's like really small. Anne-Marie, are capital projects eligible? That information is available in the program guidelines. There are several like scenarios that spell out eligible uses for capital projects or non-eligible. Vanessa, sorry, this is confusing around the piece around national organizations. So, okay, we have at the national level. So I'm just responding to Vanessa's question around, did you say that national organizations can apply to both VF and the national one? So yeah, at the national level, you have 5 readiness support partners. Those are National Aboriginal Capital Corporation Association, National Association of Friendship Centers, so 2 Indigenous. The Chantier is sort of, it's Quebec and it's different. It's national, but it's Quebec. And then Canadian Women's Foundation, funding of the gender equity rounds, and Community Foundations of Canada. Now, Community Foundations of Canada is funding national organizations that are kind of broadly community-based. So you cannot apply to Vancouver Foundation and CFC directly in this call. You can apply to Vancouver Foundation and Canadian Women's Foundation or NACA or one of those other national partners, not the Quebec one, because that's just for people in Quebec. Unless you have a place in Quebec, then please, center or location in Quebec, please go ahead. So yeah, I think that is the answer to that question. So no, you cannot apply to both Vancouver Foundation and CFC, but you can apply to both Vancouver Foundation and Canadian Women's Foundation. Adrian, I'm receiving a message about the adjudication or scoring template. And whether that is available publicly. I'm still confirming with CFC if they're going to publish the adjudication form that we're all using. If it were published, it would be published nationally and uploaded to our website. But what we have shared with you today are the different categories and things that we're looking at. So that should give you a good sense of where the emphasis is in the application. And I don't, yeah, in terms of weighting, I don't have further information on that at this time, but if we are able to publish this adjudication scoring template, we will do that. It will be CFC's scoring template. Okay, it's 12:54. Nikki, the list of the 5 organizations, in one of my earlier slides, I say, check with the ESDC website to learn more about all of these partners at the national level. You can Google Investment Readiness Program like ESDC and you will find it, or you can use the link that's in one of the earlier slides. Okay, I think I've dealt with all of the questions that are here. I just want to check, is there anything else that anyone would like to have answered before we sign off today? Okay, well, we hope this information has been helpful to you. Thank you so much, Sonam and Wayne. We'll be following up with a couple of you later, and hopefully this helps to demystify and help you think about what's important to work on as you prepare your next application. So yeah, really glad to make connection with many of you, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.